Welcome in, everybody. Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Strength for Your Purpose podcast. What an awesome interview that was last week with Dr. Andrea Smith of Synaptic Chiropractic. Her first interview on the podcast. She was a part of a workshop that I did where I provided that audio for you all here on the podcast a month or so ago. If you didn't hear that, or you didn't hear last week's, if this is your first time listening to the podcast, welcome. Thank you so much for downloading and listening. Go back and check out that previous episode. Did a workshop on posture, home office ergonomics, and Dr. Andrea did an awesome job adding a little bit more to that this week. A few other tips that go along with that topic really well. Actually, one of my favorite tips from the episode was huge for people who work from home, and is something I am going to start telling all of my clients about for sure. It was very insightful. It was very practical and pragmatic, and I think a great way for people to de-stress a little bit. And that was a big topic of our whole episode. So go check that out last week. Don't want to give too much away because she says it way better than I do. So go check that out. Next week, we'll be having another awesome interview with the director of Birth Roots, which is a local Southern Maine nonprofit. I believe they are national, but I'm talking with the director from the Portland location of Birth Roots, and they do some really great things for expecting mothers, new mothers, parents of toddlers or infants, newborns, whatever the case might be. So really exciting interview coming your way next week. This week, though, is episode 40. For 40 consecutive weeks now, I've been rolling out episodes. Can't thank you all enough for your support. And I've done this before on the podcast, but wanted to take a minute for this episode and reflect a little bit about some of the things that we have learned on the podcast over the recent episodes. And there's been a lot. And as you know, the whole goal here is to give all of you the mental, physical, and emotional strength you need to fulfill your true purpose in life, to be a better version of yourself and take those steps forward to make that change in your life, whether it's you're a new business owner or a newer business owner like myself, whether you're starting a new health and wellness journey, whether you're just trying to start a new habit, or you have a new goal you want to reach, whatever the case might be. So there's a lot in here, but there's a lot of recurring themes that we tend to see pop up over and over, talking to these experts within their field. And I just like to take some time every once in a while to reflect on these myself, because it helps me in a lot of things that I do, not only in my business, but in helping my clients achieve their goals and to improve their physical performance so that they can live a happier, healthier, and wealthier life with the people that they love and do more of what they love with those people that they love. So I like to reflect on these a little bit. And I said, why not do that together? So all of us here on the podcast are going to sort of reflect together a little bit on some of the lessons learned throughout the podcast. And we're going to frame these three lessons. There's three big lessons I kind of want to talk about, because they keep, in some way or another, maybe not this exact wording, but in one way or another, they keep coming up on the podcast with almost everybody that I get to have a conversation with. So the first one, and I'm going to frame this in a way that it was framed for me by my mentors and business coaches at Uncaged Clinician, and that is take consistent, imperfect action. So the first time I really talked about this on a podcast was on the Business of Happiness podcast, which a guest of this podcast, Dr. Taryn McCarthy. Hey, wait, but before I continue, has anyone counted how many times I've said the word podcast yet? If someone can take a tally and come back with an accurate number, I'll send them a prize. I don't know. But the Business of Happiness is a podcast I was on. It's the first podcast I was ever on, and definitely reciprocated and have Dr. Taryn McCarthy on here as well. And taking consistent, imperfect action in the frame of business is a little different than in the frame of starting a new health and wellness journey. Okay. So more recently, I talked about this here on the show with Brian Ligotti of Dirigo Fitness. They just had a great grand opening up there. And he came on and talked a little bit about his journey into starting health and wellness and actually starting to own a business in that area. And he talked about taking really consistent small steps, right? Being consistent in those small changes. And to me, that also speaks to the consistent imperfect action, because when you're new at something, it's never going to be perfect. And to be completely honest, even when you're an expert at something, whether it's business, whether it's health coaching, whether you're a healthcare provider, no matter what it is, when you're an expert, in the eyes of someone else, it's never going to be perfect anyways. So don't bog yourself down with it being absolutely perfect. Now, in the episode where I was talking, the second episode where I had Michael DeLuca on, so his first one was a few months back, second one was just recent, just a few weeks ago, talking about what he learned from his dad's experience with the NASA Apollo space program. A little different. Perfection was needed in a lot of those aspects, but the idea of a team working together to achieve that was a great lesson as well, on having the mental fortitude to be under that kind of pressure and still move forward. That's a hard thing to practice, but it can be practiced and it can be improved upon. And we talked about that a lot in the episode. But in general, okay, when we're not talking about aerospace technology, taking consistent imperfect action is still going to get you to where you want to be, because in someone's eyes, it's never going to be perfect. And I think the take home message for this first tip, this first thing that we've seen as a recurring theme on the podcast, is if we aren't always thinking about things being perfect, then we're going to be less likely to beat ourselves up over it. Okay. And I think that's the big take home message here, is take that consistent imperfect action, because taking those small little steps, checking off those smaller goals while we're working to attain a much larger goal, and doing so without worrying about perfection, is going to help us not only get there maybe a little quicker, but also feel a little bit more fulfilled in that journey. Okay. So consistent imperfect action is huge. The next thing is pivoting. How powerful it can be, and when it's done in an informed way and linked with our first tip here, which is the consistent imperfect action, can be super transformative in just about anywhere in your life. Okay. So let's frame it from this sort of health and wellness example, right? Like, let's say you're trying to work out more. Okay. And you are doing this kind of workout, but you realize that all of a sudden you're dreading it, right? You've been going, which is great. It's something, maybe the consistency of going is maybe something that you haven't had before. Like, you've never been the one to build that habit and consistently go. You've kind of waxed and waned through that and haven't been consistent with it, but you're being consistent now. But every time you go, you're like, ugh, I hate this. Pivoting to a different form of exercise at that point is going to be so powerful for you, because you already have the mindset of, I need to go and I need to make this change. And you're setting that habit within your routine. But if you absolutely hate what you're doing, making that pivot can be huge. Okay. Making that pivot can be powerful, because it's just going to strengthen what you do. And as long as that pivot still aligns with your core values, what gets you up in the morning, what drives you forward, what speaks to your passion, and you make that pivot, it is going to be absolutely huge. Jessie Lebrec of American Ninja Warrior, that was a big take home from her episode, that we had a chance to talk to her this summer. Josh Jewett and I did. And her pivot was, I still want to compete. She was doing track and field at a very high level and was at that point where she had to decide, do I go to the Olympic level? Heck, she even tried bobsledding. She tried out for the US Olympic bobsledding team, but things just didn't work out and it just didn't feel right for her. And she wound up pivoting to this Ninja Warrior competition. And now she's one of, if not the best female competitor in American Ninja Warrior. And that pivot was powerful for her, because that level of competition, that individual competition, but also a part of a community that helps drive each other forward, which is what track and field is, also aligned well in the American Ninja Warrior space. And she was able to make that sort of pivot. Dr. Andrea and Dr. Casey Winters, a few of the chiropractors we've had on the show here recently, they've made certain pivots in how they practice out of the realm of traditional chiropractic care, and making those pivots has aligned better with how they feel they need to care for their patients, and has brought them great success in that care for the patient. So as long as that pivot still aligns with your values, still is going in a direction you want to go in, especially when you realize the current direction you're on is not exactly where you want it to be, that's when you got to make that pivot for sure. And that can be very powerful, especially when we combine it with that number one tip, which is consistent, imperfect action. And I think, in thinking about this, the third take home here is to not bog ourselves down, especially with things outside of our control. So I did an episode recently about keeping it simple, right? And we also did an episode recently about taking more breaks, being more productive, simplifying things as much as possible, removing as many of the variables as possible, and doing that either mentally saying, I can't control that variable, so I don't need to invest my time and energy or money or whatever the case is into it, or just focusing more on, just focusing on controlling what you can control as an individual helps reduce down the variables that are in that situation and allows us to simplify even a little bit more. Okay. So when we're making those changes in our life, not taking up space in our mind, body, heart, soul with things that we have zero control over, while also getting the most control over what we can control and focusing on that and doing that to the best of our ability, especially when we pair that with our first two sort of take homes and reflections here, can go a long way. So let's do another example. I love framing this in examples because I think all of us on any of these topics could maybe ramble on a little bit with a bunch of nonsense and filler words, and maybe it doesn't make as much sense. But so let's give an example. So let's go on that workout example. Okay, you've made the pivot, but someone in the gym that you're at, or maybe the gym has to close because of a COVID scare, right? We're still dealing with that a little bit. Things are still kind of shutting down temporarily until some of that stuff is figured out. You can't control that. And you're bumming like, man, I was doing so well. I even changed the type of workout I was doing. I talked to my trainer about how I absolutely hated some of the stuff we were doing and was dreading some of it so much that I almost wanted to stop coming, even though I had been coming consistently for like 6 weeks or so, like 3 times a week, and made those changes. And now right as I make that change, I'm feeling better about it. Something shut down and you just bum yourself out and your diet derails a little bit and you're not taking as good care of yourself for those days that you're gone. And then when it's time to go back, you're having a hard time even getting back. You see how all that stuff can snowball, right? We can't control the fact that that gym got shut down. Okay. That's kind of the world we live in right now. And there's no one to get upset about, upset at. There's really nothing in that situation to get upset about. The best thing you can do is to control what you can control, which is keep up with your new dietary habits. I don't even want to call it a diet because I hate the term diet, but keep up with those positive changes you've been making in your diet. Find other creative ways to still do some physical activity, even if it's just going for a walk, even if it's just doing a few things at home that you don't need equipment for. Reach out to that trainer and say, hey, what can I do to keep myself going and keep working towards our goals that we've set here so that I don't get derailed? Control what you can control. Don't let your mental, physical, and emotional space get taken up with the fact that your routine has just been screwed up from something that you have zero control over. And don't let that derail you. Simplify it for yourself. Keep it simple. Only focus on what you can control. And that can go a long way, because guess what you're doing while you're doing what I just said? You pivoted, right? You pivoted in that example and you kept taking consistent, imperfect action. Okay. It all ties in beautifully. These are all things in one way or another, whether it's through habit and behavioral change we've talked about a little bit with Jason Gutman in a couple episodes I've done with him. Go back and check those out, a workshop and an individual episode with him. Some of the things that the chiropractor said. That episode, Michael DeLuca, was awesome. So many lessons. We talked about at least 2 of these 3 in that episode and probably more. Some great life business lessons in that episode as well. But these are the 3 themes that keep coming up over and over again in my mind, and maybe not word for word that way, but those general themes right there keep coming up over and over again. So definitely check out some of those other episodes that I've mentioned. If you haven't checked those out before, Michael DeLuca's on twice. We went over many of those things in both those episodes, just framed in different ways. The episode Jesse Lebrecht was awesome because you got an inside look at what a professional athlete does to prepare for their sport at the highest level possible, day in, day out, in season, out of season, all that good stuff. And I've had some great conversations with some other local practitioners who have applied those things to how they take care of their patients, how they run their business, and all of that. And it's something that we can all learn from. So please check those things out. If you found value in this episode, or you go back and listen to any of those other episodes and you took anything out of it at all, please be a friend and tell a friend, share it with someone you know, love, and care about that could find that same benefit that you did. Always appreciate the 5-star rate and reviews on Apple Podcasts. Please subscribe, download, make sure that auto download is set up and the notifications are on YouTube, so you always know when new videos post, so that you're always getting the latest episodes when they drop on your phone, tablet, computer, wherever you watch or listen to your podcast. So with that, that is it for the 40th episode. We got some more great interviews coming your way here the next few weeks. Got something really special we're cooking up. First week of the new year is going to be episode 50, right about there, right around that time is what the calendar is looking like. So be ready for that. With that being said, have a fantastic week, everybody. Make it a great one. And we'll see you back here next time on the Strength for Your Purpose podcast.